Good afternoon. A few thoughts. I stand before you, my fellow alumni, today to honor Dr. Gary Ostrower. We are just a sampling of 9,000 students Gary has taught over the last 50 years. Imagine 2 centuries. How many of you were fortunate enough to have Gary as a teacher? Raise your hand. That's great. Gary still does not believe in great inflation, even though they do it at Harvard now. The real question is how many of you earned, and I mean earned an A from Gary? Oh, there's one. A B? Oh, a couple. A C? Oh, a few. And we won't go any further. Gary's been a Fulbright lecturer. He served for 24 years on the Alfred Village Board, including 6 years as mayor. He told me he relished the chance to abuse power as an elected official. He's also been omnibus man for the university. Then there are the stories. The story about Gary falling asleep standing up while lecturing one of his classes one day. The story when he's on the treadmill at the fitness center and a young underclassman climbs on the adjacent treadmill and Gary automatically speeds up his treadmill. I've been told by a reliable source, when you walk by Gary's house at 10 o'clock in the evening, you can see through the window that Gary is still intensely working into the depths of the night. Gary's a man of great ideas. I was on campus in May, and he mentioned to me the idea of changing the academic year. Rather than going to school from, say, August until May, we would change the academic year here at Alfred to go from March to December. That would allow students to enjoy the wonderful summers here at Alfred, avoiding the winters, and also allowing for more opportunity for internships when students are away from the university in the winter. But Gary told me no one would listen to him. That's Gary thinking out of the box. Gary is one of a kind. He's a professor's professor. He's an individual of integrity, decency, and manliness. He is Mr. Alfred University, strong and faithful. People like Gary make the world a much better place for us all. Gary, thank you. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you. When Janet called me on the phone to ask me if I'd like to participate in this, I said yes before she could even finish her invitation. I guess I was in probably the second or third class that Gary taught here back in '69. I was a first semester junior, and he just arrived, and that started a love affair with me and history. Gary taught us to read, write, and think. That's, I guess, kind of the central tenet of a liberal arts education. Throughout the years, after graduating, I guess career, jobs, family, didn't communicate. But about 10 years ago, one afternoon, I was sitting at work and I said, I'm going to give him a call, see if he remembers me. And he did. So for the past about 10 years, we have kept in touch, and maybe every 2 or 3 months, he'll call me or I'll call him, say, what are you reading? What do you think about it? Do you have any ideas about this or that? How does it tie together? And that's all, I think, a product of experience and growing and realizing what it means to learn how to read, write, and think. Or for me anyway, take a period in history, start thinking about it, reading about it. So you have this, then you want to go to here, go to here, go to here, and then you have to pull it all together to get the big picture. And that's one of the lessons that I learned from Gary. Learned how to be inquisitive, learned how to write. In fact, about 6 years ago, I was taking just a course at the local community college, and I wrote a paper on union financing the Civil War. And after I finished, I sent it to him, and he said, it's good facts, good stuff. You need to rewrite it. He said, you're not telling a story. So that was discouraging, but he was right. I haven't rewritten it. And the reason is because of all the annotations and citations that I had. I'd have to, juggle and rejuggle them all, and I didn't want to do that. But I'm going to speak to him later because I feel like it's time to, write something again, and I'll get some good advice for him for sure. We were talking last week, I guess, about a lot of these states now that are passing their own anti-abortion laws, and we came to the conclusion that, in addition to it being its own issue, that it really could become an issue of federalism as far as the courts are concerned. And again, that's just another example of the type of thinking you learn when you take a class or associate with Gary. You learn to think. You have to. He demanded it. The first weekend of my first class with him, he assigned a book to be read, not a long book, a short book, over the weekend. I was telling him this yesterday. And there was Monday, he called on somebody to about a question he had. The guy hadn't read the book. I guess in current parlance, Gary ripped him one. So you knew he commanded respect, and you didn't mess around. You knew what you had to do, and you did it. And we've talked about this a number of times about how it seems that current students might not do all the reading and all the work they should do, and it's sad, but that's the way it is. But I do owe an awful lot of my ability to read, write, and think to Gary. It's been a long time, a long friendship. Hope it continues a lot longer. And thank you again. Thank you for your service to the university and your community. And best of luck going forward to you and your family. So if you'd all give it up for Gary, that would be wonderful.
Hello, Gary. This is Rick Seckendorf from North Carolina. I could not get to Rochester that easily from here, where I'm tucked away here. But I'm not very good at taking these things. Janet was nice enough after I promised her only 2 minutes, so I'm going to have to keep this short. And sorry, this angle makes my head look like the size of Wyoming. But all I can tell you is this: what a beautiful honor it is for those of us, not today, luncheon, but just those of us who have gotten to know you over the years. My Alfred experience when I was a student there was enriched by having you as a very young professor in history, and just as a friend, a beautiful human being. Again, I'll keep this short. We had some great times together. And actually, to be honest with you, most importantly, one of my 3 sons, when he decided beautifully to go to Alfred, you took him in just as a friend, in addition to being a student, of course, which I don't think he was the best. Neither was I, unfortunately. I think you told him that. But most importantly to me, you brought him in beautifully to Alfred. He had the world's best 4 years there. Okay, now you're just going to have to hear my voice. But I'll show you some fond memories. Now, that's graduation weekend. My idiotic son on the far left, my Alfred son, my other son, another one of my sons, next to you. But this son, Adam, who you got to know very well, wearing a t-shirt, it's just a flesh wound from Monty Python. Don't ask me how they allowed that on the Alfred golf course, or wherever that was, close to Alfred. And then, whoops, sorry about that. And then to take a close look at this picture. I'm sorry to do this to you. This is my two wall of fames at home. You're on both of them. So that's another shot, but take a close look at his golf shoes. Nothing, bare feet. I can see you and I both had zero influence on him in terms of how to behave normally in today's society. So that's it, Gary. I just wanted to thank you for everything. That son, Adam, he would tell me not being there is an indication of me not caring enough. Just to give me like he always does. But I'm with you in every way possible. You know, you were never PC, even back then, 40 some odd years ago, which amazes me. But you taught me the P and the C of humanity. You helped me become a better person, passion and compassion. And you showed me that early in my life in a big way. And I've thought about that a lot and tried to emulate that here and there. Anyway, thank you for everything you've brought into my life, into Adam's life, enriching both of our lives in ways you can't even imagine. So thanks for that and for the days to come as well.
Hello, Dr. Ostrower, or aloha as we say here in Hawaii. Sorry I missed you just recently when you were in town, but I would like to say congratulations. 50 years at Alfred is an amazing achievement, and I'm honored to have known you during that time. If you've seen my dad's video at this point, he happened to mention that I may have not learned anything from him or from you, but I would like you to know that is very much not true. If I've learned anything from him or gotten anything from him in my life, it was that he brought me to Alfred to begin with, and during that time while I was there, I was fortunate enough to meet you and become a friend, I would like to think, and our times playing golf and in class. You helped me as well as you did to understand what it means to become an adult traveling through the world that we live in, and partially that's the reason that I am where I am now, in a very comfortable and happy place, and living the life that I am happy to be living. And my time at Alfred is something that I remember extremely fondly and with a lot of joy and passion, some of the best times of my life, and you were a large part of that. And the way that you interacted with me, not just because you knew my father, but because as a professor and in our times outside of there, golfing and enjoying each other's company, I feel very blessed that I was a part of that, and I will never forget it. Hopefully we will see each other again fairly soon when I end up back through Alfred, or if you end up back in Hawaii. But either way, congratulations again, and thank you for everything you did for me. And enjoy your honored day tomorrow, and hopefully I'll see you soon.
They told me I have 6 minutes to say something about Gary. So I thought, what would Gary Ostrower do if they gave him 6 minutes to speak? Answer, he'd take 12 at least. So in honour of Gary, I'll take 7. As chair of the Division of Human Studies, I like to think of myself as Gary's boss, although I'm not sure he sees our relationship in quite that way. So last year, when Gary was up for his 5-year review, I had to write the divisional report supporting our recommendation that the university renew his contract. This has got to be one of the easiest administrative tasks around. Faculty are assessed on various counts, teaching, scholarship, service, etc. And Gary rather obviously rings the bells on all of them. As his chair, I have access to his personal file, which, since historians never throw anything away, is by now pretty thick. It goes all the way back to his initial letter of inquiry in 1969, expressing interest in the job, a letter from his chair then recommending that he be appointed on a salary of $8,800. Nothing has been redacted. But disappointingly, there seems to be nothing in the file of what I'd call blackmail quality. Instead, it's just 50 years of people banging on about what an absolutely wonderful asset Gary is to Alfred University. I'll let others detail his catalogue of achievements. his publications, teaching awards, record of service to AU and the community at large. I'd like to say something about Gary from a more personal angle as a friend and colleague, because there is so much that the objective record cannot capture. Gary is a great teacher. Everyone knows it. He's not just good or very good, he's one of the greats. In the many, many years I spent as a student, I had quite a few decent teachers, but I never had one that came close to Gary. He is one of those happy few whose work is not just a job or a career, but a true vocation, a calling. It really is hard to imagine him doing anything else. So what makes him such an outstanding teacher? Well, he's ridiculously knowledgeable about his subject, of course. He's incredibly hardworking and conscientious. He makes a point, even with his larger classes, of meeting his students one-on-one to get to know them better. And if you're sitting in Gary's class and you're hoping he'll let you out early, forget it. 60 seconds left, just time to squeeze in one more very important point about the Louisiana Purchase. And Gary, notoriously, is a tough grader. Many distinguished alums can tell tales of his brutal honesty when assessing their work. Put it this way, he does not subscribe to the ego-massaging school of pedagogy. He's definitely on the tough love team. Here's what his chair said of him in 1970, after he'd been teaching here for 1 year. His standards, high for himself, are also correspondingly high for students. But as far as I can see, he is humane. But lots of teachers are knowledgeable, conscientious, and have high standards. These may be necessary for greatness, but they aren't sufficient. What really underlies Gary's achievements is passion. For as the philosopher Hegel says, nothing great in the world has ever been accomplished without passion. First, Gary is passionate about his subject. Nothing concerning history is uninteresting to him. And this passion spills out beyond history to many other fields. I've been discussing history, politics, philosophy, literature, sport, culture, you name it, with Gary now for over 20 years. I can't recall a single time, not one, when he wasn't up for serious intellectual conversation. His appetite for such discussion isn't just voracious, it's inexhaustible. This is the mark of the true scholar, one who just loves to learn and to discuss what they are learning. Honestly, paying Gary to study and teach history is like paying someone to eat ice cream. Second, Gary is passionate about teaching. Not just enthusiastic, but truly passionate. He's been teaching for over 50 years and he could have retired long ago. I assume he could afford to, although you'd wonder about that if you saw how much time he spends looking for lost golf balls. Many excellent scholars and teachers do find that for various reasons, the flame of their enthusiasm eventually burns lower. But Gary's flame burns as brightly now as half a century ago. His love of and commitment to what he does remains undiminished. But of course, as always, there is a worm in the apple. When Aristotle, who had been Plato's student for 20 years, came to criticize his teacher's ideas, he famously said to his audience, "Plato is very dear to us, but the truth is still more dear." Well, I love Gary, but I also love the truth, which means I have to say something about Gary's golf game. On this topic, I believe I am the world's leading authority, having played many rounds of golf with Gary at our local 9-hole course. And I have to tell you the sad truth. Gary is a mediocre golfer. Now, when I ran this past my wife, Vicky, she said, "Calling him mediocre is a bit harsh, isn't it? I mean, this is supposed to be a eulogy. Couldn't you come up with a gentler euphemism?" I said, "You haven't seen Gary play golf. Mediocre is a euphemism." But to be fair, although his form is inconsistent, Gary can sometimes produce the goods on the links. Only last year, he hit a hole-in-one. By coincidence, it just happened to be the one morning that month when he was going around all by himself. But he had proof, his scorecard. He stopped by my house to show it to me. Fortunately for him, I never took his course on examining historical documents with a critical eye. So let the historical record show that while studying and teaching history rather than playing golf is Gary's true calling in life, even on the golf course, he is capable of greatness. Gary's body language tells you a lot about the sort of person he is. I put it to you that Gary might be described as the anti-Buddha. Think about a typical statue of the Buddha. He sits serene, legs crossed, hands in lap, a wise, beatific smile on his face that bespeaks inner peace. If Alfred one day erects a statue of Gary, and they should, it will have to show him hunched intently over his laptop, surrounded by books and papers, smiling either delightedly or grimly, depending on what he's reading or writing about. And the statue will have to rock backwards and forwards, because, as everyone knows, Gary rocks. The sitting Buddha contemplates a world beyond this one. Gary, by contrast, is 100% engaged with this world. And that, ultimately, is why his flame still burns so bright. He has a deep and abiding belief in the importance of the work to which he has dedicated so much of his life. Because history is not merely interesting. Understanding our history is a form of self-awareness that we all must cultivate if we are to have any hope of learning from the past and building a better future. Gary's contribution to Alfred over the past half-century has been truly massive. There are few people, if any, to whom the university and the community owes so much. Great gratitude is in order, but in equal measure, we should also feel great pride to be associated with such an outstanding scholar, teacher, and citizen. Gary, you rock.
First met Gary when I was finishing up my former job. He came to see me up in Rochester. And he's a historian. I love history, but our historical counts differ. He claims he only came with 18 ideas. I think it was 38. One of them included shifting the calendar. One of them included renaming ourselves King Alfred University. So we haven't run with all his ideas. But one that he brought with him concerned a classmate of his who's with us today. Marvin talked about Gary teaching him to read, think, and write. But most importantly, Gary has kept teaching us to think about what's right. He's our ombuds person. He also serves at St. Bonaventure in that capacity. When there's a really tough issue, he's one of my go-to people, because when you need a check on what will have the greatest integrity and how to best solve the problem, he's an invaluable colleague. So Gary, we'd like to present you today with the Presidential Order of Merit. Throughout its history, our university has been blessed with excellent teachers, scholars who understand that the professor-student relationship is at the core of good teaching. You are one such teacher. It is altogether fitting and proper that we bestow this honor on you, celebrating your 50th anniversary as a member of our faculty. Your colleagues respect your intellect, incisive mind, and scholarly acumen. Our alumni recall you as one of the mainstays of Western civilization, a team-taught course that tortured students who struggled to make it to class by 8 a.m., but who now remember it as one of the best courses they took at our university. His mastery of the subject and teaching style earned you the honor of being named a Joseph Cruson Distinguished Professor and a Fulbright Lecturer. As a scholar, Gary's work has focused on global intergovernmental organizations. He's authored 3 books on the topic: Collective Insecurity, the United States and the League of Nations during the early 30s, the League of Nations from 1919 to 1929, and the United Nations in the United States, 1940 to 1998. His expertise gained him an invitation to lecture nationally on C-SPAN about World War II. In 2012, he was one of 400 faculty members nationally named a super professor by Faculty Row. Students and alumni comment on Gary's concern not just for those in class, but across campus, earning him the Ombuds Officer designation for our university. Nothing highlights his passion for social justice more than his efforts to right a wrong done more than 50 years ago, when classmate Warren Sutton was compelled to leave our university. An African American and one of our university's best all-time basketball players, Warren was dating the blonde-haired, blue-eyed daughter of our university's treasurer. In the face of pressure from the administration, Warren left school, fearing the revocation of his scholarship. Gary worked tirelessly to have our university, recognize the wrong done to Warren and to make amends. We did so in part by bestowing a Doctor of Humane Letters honoris causa on Warren Sutton in 2017. Warren is sitting at our table here. So passionate about letting others know that Alfred University had righted the wrong done to Warren, Gary spearheaded a successful campaign to call attention to Warren's story by the national media. Gary writes opinion pieces, appears on the radio frequently and TV. His concern for his community, where he's lived for more than 50 years, first as a student and now as a faculty member, led him to serve as a trustee on our Alfred Village Board for 18 years and then 6 years as mayor. For all, Gary, you've done to teach our students, your colleagues, to promote an intellectual passion for history, advocacy for those who need representation, and serve our community, we bestow upon you today, Gary Ostrower, Alfred University's Presidential Order of Merit, with our great gratitude and congratulations.
Well, hello. I'm not quite sure what to say about all of this. I didn't expect to hear some of what I heard. Emrys Westacott, of course, was lying about my golf mediocrity. I'm actually less than mediocre, but 54 shots for 9 holes, and I've done that now 4 times this over the past 2 weeks. There are a few things that I would like to say, though, and one is that I'm unaccustomed to public speaking, so I'm really very, very nervous. And for that reason, I'm going to read most of my comments rather than merely speak extemporaneously here. I do want to say something, though. As I was walking here a few minutes ago, I stopped through the Ceramic Museum. There are only about 50 of you who have seen that Ceramic Museum in the last 2 days, and I strongly recommend it. It's one of the great, probably the best ceramic museum in the country. It's just a few feet from where we are right here. So as you're leaving this campus, make sure before you leave the campus that you see the Ceramic Museum. I also want to make a note about the fact that I am a historian. I take history very seriously. I try to convey that to my students. I think you got a sense of that from some of the comments that were made. And I tell every one of those students when they arrive in my freshman, the American Survey class, you should remember the words of that great American philosopher George Santayana, which was said back in 1906, "Those who fail to learn the lessons of history are doomed to repeat it next semester." Now, I was told not to start off with a joke. So I will not start off with a joke, but I do want to tell you a true story, a very, very brief true story. I am a Bills fan. A couple years ago, I was up in Buffalo on a Sunday. I wanted to watch a game. It was midwinter. It was very, very cold. My dog was in my car. I certainly didn't want to leave the dog in the car while I found a bar where I could watch the game. And so I prevailed on a bartender to allow the dog to come in with me. The game began. The Bills received the ball. They went down. They're playing the Patriots. They just drove down the field right at the beginning of the game. They stalled on the Patriots' 20-yard line, and the Bills kicked a field goal. Well, my dog was so thrilled with this that she hops up onto the counter of the bar and with her right front paw starts to high-five everyone on that counter. And the bartender was just amazed at this. He says, "My God, if this is what she does when they kick a field goal, what does she do when they when they score a touchdown?" And I said, "I don't know. I've only owned her for 4 years." Okay. I play. I have a lot of people to thank, so you'll have to indulge me a little bit here. And I'm not going to be able to name everyone because I just don't have the time. Many of the people that I want to thank are, of course, in this room right now, including, I might add, my twin brother from San Antonio, Texas, and now living in part in Boston with his wife Valerie, who have come up for this occasion. My son Pete is here with his wife Megan. Pete's a teacher in a charter school down in Brooklyn, New York, and so is Megan. Unfortunately, my daughter is not here. She was told by her obstetrician just about 3 or 4 days ago that she should not make this trip. She's due to give birth in about 2 weeks or so, so I want to wish her well with her husband, Taylor. Taylor, by the way, is in the field of big data, of data analytics. He spoke here at Alfred University twice without charge over the last couple of years. Warren Sutton, of course, is here. You heard a little bit about that from President Zupan. Warren is here from Kitchener, Ontario. And maybe I should say Dr. Warren Sutton, because Alfred University has conferred upon him a Doctor of Humane Letters. And I hope that every Alfredian knows his really fascinating story by now. And it's a story not only about Warren Sutton, it's a story about a university that is willing to admit a mistake, and a serious mistake. Mark Zupan plays a large role in that, committed to, if you will, righting a wrong that occurred over a half-century ago, when racial discrimination sullied Alfred's reputation for liberal and for moral commitment. I mean, it was back here in this university that in the 19th century, Susan B. Anthony spoke here. Frederick Douglass spoke here. We took pride in that kind of a reputation, and that was certainly damaged, I think, by what happened to Warren Sutton in 1959. Okay, that story became national news, and AU's revisit of that episode has been in newspapers throughout New York State, and most recently, I think it was on December 23rd of last year, on the front page of the sports section of the Philadelphia Inquirer. And you're going to hear a little bit more about Warren in just a few minutes, so just hold on here. Some of my friends from graduate school are here, including Larry Bell, a historian of the Renaissance who became a dean at RIT for many years, and who taught at Alfred University back during the 1970s. Joel Blatt, one of my very closest friends from graduate school when we were together at the University of Rochester. Joel is a historian of, I think, a rather sad chapter in the history of both France and of Italy during the period of fascism during the 1930s. Bruce Griffith, Father Bruce Griffith is here. Father Griffith is currently the rector at the Cathedral of the Incarnation in Garden City, Long Island, and he's a former resident of Alfred. Some of you may remember him from here. His wife at that time was teaching in our nursing school. His wife Rita, his new wife Rita, is here with him right now. Rita was working with UNICEF for many years. There are some terrific former students who have come back, including Marvin Kierstead, who you heard from a few minutes ago, Jim Jordan, who you heard from a few minutes ago, Tyler Maroney, who is sitting on that table and is, if you're looking for a private investigator, folks, you contact Tyler Maroney right now, a wonderful student. And Carlisle Hicks, where is Carlisle? Carlisle Hicks over here, one of the outstanding students, one of the most memorable students that I've ever taught at Alfred University. I remember these kids, and I remember these kids because there's much to remember about them. There are plenty of others who are here. My dean is here, Beth Ann Doby, and philosopher Bill Dibbrell is here, okay, a member of my own division here. Lou Lickman, who I think many of you have probably known because he too has been here almost 50 years teaching in the psychology department, okay. I don't have time to mention all of these other people, so I hope they don't feel bad, but I do want to single out one or two or three of them. Abdu Rabbana is not here. He and his wife Zakia left Alfred a number of years ago. And I want to just note that Abdu is very ill right now. He's terminally ill. He's living in California, and I want to send him my best, and I'm sure that I send my best on the part of all of you who have taken courses from Abdu over the course of those years. Another who I want to highlight is Larry Greil, not only for his outstanding scholarship in the area of sociology, of reproductive sociology, but especially his yeoman work for more than 30 years, as the head of our Hillel chapter. And I also want to single out, and I'm very grateful for what she said before, Sister Margaret Kearney. Okay, Sister Margaret Kearney, the past president at St. Bonaventure, not only helped me expand my own wings as ombudsman at her university, I was already doing that at this university, but she provided me with an invaluable appreciation, not only of Catholicism, but of Catholicism within the context of a Franciscan educational framework. Okay, more specifically, in other words, the kind of framework that I think most of us can appreciate, within the context of the academic community. Now, look, I am not a religious person, but I owe a great debt, I think, to both Sister Margaret and to my good friend Bruce Griffith, Father Bruce Griffith, by making me more ecumenical than I had ever dreamed I could have been when I started teaching at Alfred University back in 1959. As a historian, their work has deepened my own understanding of the critical role of religion in an otherwise secular and scientific age that we've constructed on a foundation of humanitarian reform on one hand and of reason on the other. There are some other folks here who predated my arrival in Alfred. They will recall that when I showed up in 1957 as a student, Alfred had some customs that seem just a wee bit antiquated today. For instance, stores were open on Sunday, but not on Saturday, and that was in observance of the Seventh-day Baptist Sabbath on Saturday. As a Jew, I felt perfectly at home with that. Wow, was this user-friendly. Okay? Frosh students back in those days were required to wear green beanies. Now look, if you don't know what a beanie is, it's a yarmulke with a brim. Okay? Female students lived in dorms with an 11 p.m. curfew, and all Frosh were required, and I mean required, to say hello to upperclassmen on pain of having to sing the alma mater if they did not do that. We did, okay? We said that hello, and it was good. It made this a friendlier campus. I think it was really, in some ways, great, although I hated doing it at the time. Breakfast was served to us in Bartlett Hall from, and you get this now, from 6:45 a.m. until 7 a.m. That's a full hour before classes even began, just for 15 minutes. Now look, the French Revolution began for reasons that weren't as serious as what I just mentioned to you. Okay? And for crying out loud, the food itself did not exactly distinguish itself. We ate mystery meat and we ate Jell-O salads with a little dollop of mayonnaise. I mean, God, we survived, folks, okay? We survived. And if we didn't say that hello, if we didn't, do these things we were supposed to do, we would then be required to spell the word Kanikadea backwards. A-E-D-A-K-A-N-A-K, okay? That was, okay. And if some of this stuff seems kind of silly, if it seems, sort of trivial, I just want you to remember that these were the days when they had panty raids, and these were the days when college students were swallowing goldfish. You young people, okay, all you graduates after 1970 probably have no recollection of this kind of thing. And damn it, I got a really, really good education here. Many of you will recall the academic superstars of that earlier period. I'm talking about people like Mel Bernstein and Van Frechette and Dave Leach and Dave O'Hara and Mike Sibley and geologist Dan Sass. Okay? We read more than students do today. We read more then than students do today. Sit-ins that started in Greensboro, North Carolina, helped to engage us, to energize us with the world outside the university. Back then, academic expectations were higher. Those were the glory days of our great, great, great Western civilization course. And when I returned to teach in 1969, I encountered an environment that increasingly placed a premium on critical thinking. And those weren't just words for us. Okay? The white Christian-only restrictions on fraternity membership had disappeared. My colleague, Gary Horowitz, also a historian, Horowitz, note that name? Okay, Gary Horowitz, of all people, had become the faculty advisor to Lambda Chi Alpha. Now, that to me was, I guess it just proves the Enlightenment belief in progress here. Education. And I mean education everywhere, not only at Alfred University, bred greater tolerance and respect for individuals in a way that promoted civil rights. We aimed our fire back in that period at racial injustice, but eventually it became not only racial injustice, but it became gender injustice, it became sexual orientation injustice, and so forth. We learned a lot at Alfred, and we learned a lot at many other universities, and I think we're all the better for it today. Alfred in 1957 had only about a half dozen students of color. Today we have close to 25% students of color. That also says something about, I think, what we would call progress. Okay, I've talked a little bit about the food. My goodness, okay, there are a lot of ways in which I think this university has become a better place. And Alfred, I might add, turned me into a historian, particularly with the influence of David Leach, who some of you will remember, Professor Leach. By the time I graduated, I knew exactly what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. For good or ill, I always prided myself, and I still do pride myself in the classroom, on not being overly political in that classroom. I remember one adult student way back in 1984, that was an election year, saying to me after he had taken my course the survey course in American history, he said, I never knew, okay, and this is after the election of 84, whether you were going to vote for Mondale or whether you were going to vote for Ronald Reagan. He didn't know that, and I was proud of the fact that he didn't know it, and I still take pride in that kind of, if you will, fairness. And I equally prided myself on asking questions that required more than a dry-as-dust history regurgitation. You heard a little bit of this from Marvin Kierstead before. Questions such as, does the religious freedom clause of our First Amendment permit churches to engage in animal or even human sacrifice? Okay? Or, why do we think that we have a right of privacy when the right of privacy is ignored entirely in the Constitution of the United States? Or speaking about that Constitution, which guarantees our individual rights. I hope most of you have read carefully the First Amendment, okay? That guarantees individual rights. Why would that same Constitution mandate a 3/5 clause for slaves? And why would it mandate, a fugitive slave clause, a fugitive slave clause? In other words, we talked about democracy. And yet somehow or another, our democracy, we discover, was not quite as democratic as our national myths would like to suggest. I take pride in making students uncomfortable, not comfortable. Our t-shirts say, comfortable. No, I think we got to make our students a little bit uncomfortable. Challenge them in respect to their conventional thinking. Well, I owe mountains of gratitude to all of those students who took my courses, and particularly those who took my courses seriously. Okay? I've had some truly memorable moments in the classrooms. I've had a few moments that really are maybe not quite so memorable. I just want to mention one of those in the interest of truth in advertising here. In 1975, I took a class to England. It was an Allen term class. We were there for about 30 days. And I took them to a Chinese restaurant on Girard Street. I had never had hot and sour soup. I knew I wanted to try some. So with all the students there, I ordered my hot and sour soup. Came out, it was kind of a little different than I had expected. It looked sort of like a canned broth, but that's all right. So I ate the soup. It wasn't very good at all. And a few minutes later, the waiter brought out my first course, which was the hot and sour soup. And I thought, what in the world did I just eat? And it turned out that I had eaten the fluid in the finger bowl. Well, I'll be darned if I wanted the waiter to know how dumb we Americans were, okay? So I took my tea, which was kind of the same color, and I just poured it into the finger bowl, okay? That was a kind of scam, just like the scams that many of my students engage in when they try to convince me that they have done the assigned reading when in fact they have not done the assigned reading. I love teaching. I love the scams. I enjoy what I'm doing. I hope I can do it for a few more years effectively. I want to thank all of you. I want to thank all of you for showing up, but I do want to say one more thing which is kind of important, and that is this, that I want to especially thank not only President Zupan and Jason Amor and Janet Marble. Where's Janet Marble? Is she here? Maybe not here. Janet Marble is one of the people who made this entire affair possible. But I also want to thank my wife of 40 years, Judy Samber. Okay, a real, honest to goodness. She's a real, honest to goodness Judge Judy. The mother also of my two great kids. I owe you a lot. You are my best friend. Yeah, I owe you a lot. And finally, I want to invite up here a few people, if you would please. Warren Sutton. And I would like to invite up our athletic director, Paul Vecchio, and equally our basketball coach, Russ Phillips. If you could all come up here for just a moment. And the president. Alfred University's basketball team this past season, I do go to games. Alfred University's basketball team was awfully good this past season. We've been good for quite a number of years, and we are still, I think, on the top, literally on the top of our game. This year, Alfred University's basketball team won the Empire 8 championship. We then went to the NCAA regionals. We got into the second round before finally we lost to a very good team from Virginia. And as a result of all of this really fine work that the team did this year, the team was awarded championship rings. And on behalf of the gentlemen who are standing here right now, I want to award to Warren Sutton, who spoke to our basketball team, and who I think I can fairly say inspired our basketball team this very year, one of those championship rings.